A lot of people confuse effort with love. They think that if you're not always available, always responsive, always initiating, then you must not care. But that's a dangerous myth, especially when it comes to building romantic attraction. In fact, many women have been taught that to show interest, they need to constantly prove it. Reply quickly. Say yes to everything. Check in, reassure, pursue. But here's the truth that changes everything. Doing less doesn't mean you care less. It simply means you understand your value. See, when someone really likes you, they don't need to be smothered with attention to know that you're interested. And if they do need that level of constant reassurance, it's not a relationship. It's emotional babysitting. And that's not your job. Your job is not to fill in every gap of silence. Your job is not to chase the connection or to constantly nurture it so it doesn't fade. That's not love. That's anxiety dressed up as commitment. When you do less, you're not withholding affection. You're recalibrating the dynamic. You're showing that you are not someone who trades effort for validation. You're not saying, I don't like you. You're saying, I like you, but I also like me. And I'm not going to abandon myself just to get closer to you. Closer to you? That's powerful. Now, let's be honest. It's hard. It's hard to stop yourself from sending that text or making excuses for someone who hasn't shown up the way you hoped. But here's the deeper issue. When you constantly give, even when the energy isn't matched, you send the message that your presence is a given. That your energy is always available, no matter how little is returned. And the moment something becomes too easy to access, we naturally stop valuing it. Men, just like anyone, are drawn to what feels real, rare, and respected. If you're always available, always giving, always proving, then he never gets to wonder. He never gets the experience of stepping forward because you've already crossed the entire distance for him. Attraction, real attraction, needs space to breathe. When you do less, you leave room for curiosity, for investment, for him to wonder how you're feeling, what you're thinking, and whether he's earning your time or just receiving it by default. Doing less isn't about playing hard to get. It's about knowing that you already are. Not because you're aloof or manipulative, but because you know your time, energy, and love are valuable. So you don't give them away freely to someone who hasn't demonstrated that they deserve them. When you embrace this mindset, you stop equating constant effort with deeper connection. And instead, you start showing up from a place of quiet confidence, the kind of presence that doesn't need to chase love, because it understands that love, the real kind, will rise to meet it. The most attractive quality you can ever have is self-respect. Not charm, not beauty, not even kindness, although all of those things are wonderful, but without self-respect, they lose their power. When a woman truly values herself, it shows in the smallest of ways. It's not something she announces, it's something she embodies. It's something she embodies. Men fall for the woman who values herself not because she makes them jump through hoops or plays mind games. They fall because she sends a very clear message. I am already whole. She doesn't need a man to complete her. She wants someone who adds to a life that's already rich, already full, already meaningful. Think about this. When you don't value yourself, every action you take in dating comes from fear. You fear he'll lose interest, so you overgive. You fear silence, so you over-communicate. You fear being alone, so you tolerate inconsistency. But when you do value yourself, the equation flips. You no longer act out of fear. You act from a place of calm confidence. You don't chase. You don't beg. You don't prove. You allow people to show up or not. And that alone is magnetic. The reason this is so powerful is because men, like anyone, are drawn to energy that is centered. When a woman carries herself with self-worth, she becomes the standard. She's not asking someone to love her so she can feel worthy. She already knows she is, and she's letting someone rise to meet her. And here's the kicker. People treat you in direct proportion to how they perceive you treat yourself. If you constantly bend your boundaries, ignore red flags, or over-accommodate to be liked, you're teaching him how to treat you. You're saying, this is the level I accept. But when you show you're not afraid to walk away from someone who doesn't meet your needs, you create instant respect. Not through force, but through alignment. Self-value isn't loud, it's not arrogant, it's subtle. It's the pause before saying yes. It's taking time to respond instead of reacting. It's not filling silence with over-explaining. It's knowing that your time is precious, your love is rare, and your attention is not something to be thrown around. It's something that is earned. When a man meets a woman who values herself, something shifts. He's not just impressed, he's inspired. She doesn't compete, she doesn't cling, she doesn't convince. She simply stands tall in her own energy, and that space challenges him to bring the best version of himself to the table. So if you want a man to fall, start by falling in love with you, with your own company, with your own peace, with your own power. Because the moment you stop proving your worth is the moment you start attracting someone who sees it without needing to be told. There's a psychological truth that most people don't realize is quietly sabotaging their love lives. The more you chase someone, the more they resist. Not because they're mean or manipulative, but because human nature doesn't respond well to being cornered. Especially in romantic dynamics, pressure creates pushback. When you chase, when you're always initiating, always suggesting, always filling the space, you might think you're showing dedication. But what it often does is take away the natural tension that allows someone to lean toward you. Think about it. When someone is always leaning in, where is the space for you to move? You instinctively lean back. That's exactly what happens when we over-pursue. We remove the other person's opportunity to choose us. Chasing often comes from a place of anxiety. It's rooted in the fear that if we don't keep the energy alive, it will fade. So we text first, we follow up, we check in, we make the plans, we initiate the conversations, we try to keep their attention by always being the one to show up. But the message underneath that behavior is this: I'm afraid you're not as into me as I'm into you, and I'm trying to manage that gap. And unfortunately, people sense that. This kind of chasing energy often backfires because it doesn't create connection. It creates pressure. It makes the other person feel like they have to respond or engage out of obligation, not desire. And attraction, when it's genuine, comes from freedom. It comes from choosing each other, not being pushed into the rhythm of a relationship that only one person is building. Now, this doesn't mean you shouldn't show interest or that making an effort is bad. Not at all. But there's a difference between contributing to a connection and carrying it. A healthy relationship is built on mutual pursuit, not one person doing the emotional labor while the other decides if they feel like matching it. When you stop chasing, you create room for the other person to show up. You let them experience the silence and ask themselves, where did she go? You allow them to initiate, to wonder, to invest. That pause where they don't hear from you right away, where they aren't constantly being pursued. That's where attraction either lives or dies. And if it dies in that space, then it was never real to begin with. If it lives, they come forward willingly. Not because you nudged them, but because they felt something worth pursuing. Let the people who want you come toward you. Let them show you how interested they really are when you stop doing all the work. That's not manipulation. That's emotional clarity. When you chase, you teach someone to stand still. When you stop, you give them the opportunity to move, and the right one will. One of the most overlooked truths in dating is this: space creates desire, and yet it's also the most misunderstood. We live in a world of constant contact, texts, voice notes, likes, stories, replies. There's this unspoken pressure to stay connected, to always be in touch, to prove we're still interested. But attraction doesn't grow in saturation. It grows in the quiet moments, in the unknown, in the space where someone gets to miss you. When you're always available, always responding instantly, always filling every moment with attention, you're not allowing the other person the opportunity to feel the natural pull of curiosity. You're removing the element of anticipation, which is crucial in the early stages of attraction. Because here's what most people forget. People value what they feel. And one of the most powerful feelings in early romantic connection is longing. Longing doesn't come from constant access. It comes from absence, not disappearance, but a healthy distance. When you're not constantly present, when there's a pause between the last interaction and the next, the mind starts to engage. The other person begins to wonder about you, to imagine what you're doing, to replay your last conversation. That emotional space becomes a breeding ground for attraction. Not because you're playing games, but because you're allowing their emotions to catch up to yours. In fact, when you fill every gap with presence, checking in constantly, updating them on every moment of your day, making sure there are no unanswered messages, you rob them of the chance to initiate, to come toward you and to feel that they're choosing to be there. And choice is everything in love. Attraction that's forced through over communication often feels like pressure, not passion. Giving space is not about being cold or distant. It's about being confident enough to let things breathe. To trust that you don't need to constantly remind someone of your existence to matter. The right person won't forget you just because you're quiet for a moment. In fact, they'll feel your absence more deeply if they've had a meaningful experience of your presence. This is especially important for women who feel the urge to keep the connection alive at all costs. What you must remember is that the connection is not kept alive by how often you talk. It's kept alive by how each of you feels when you're not talking. That emotional tension, that curiosity, that wondering, that's what fans the flame, not the constant drip of attention. So resist the urge to always fill the silence. Let them miss you. Let them reach out. Let them notice the difference between having you in their life and not. That's not passive, it's powerful. And when someone begins to experience your absence as something meaningful, that's when attraction transforms into something deeper. Emotional significance, because sometimes it's in your silence that your presence becomes the loudest. Many people confuse being constantly available with being emotionally open. They think if I'm always here when he calls, if I reply right away, if I never say no, then he'll see how much I care. But that's a misunderstanding of what truly creates emotional connection. Availability is about time. Emotional accessibility is about depth. And the two are not the same. You can be physically available every minute of the day, texting back instantly, saying yes to every invitation, always free for a call, but if you're not bringing your real self to the table, it won't matter. Emotional accessibility is about how open you are, how honest you are, and how willing you are to let someone see the real you. That's what people connect with. In fact, when someone is too available in the early stages, it can often feel performative. It's like they're trying to prove they're a relationship material by always being around, always agreeable, always pleasant. But real emotional connection doesn't come from perfect behavior. It comes from vulnerability, boundaries, and authenticity. You can be emotionally accessible while still being unavailable sometimes. In fact, having boundaries around your time can actually make your emotional presence more powerful when you are together. Because then your attention feels intentional. It feels real. You're not just there because you have nothing else to do. You're there because you chose to be. That distinction changes everything. Many women fall into the trap of thinking that if they don't keep showing up, they'll be forgotten. But what often happens is the opposite. When you're always available without showing any deeper emotional truth, your values, your standards, your past, your passions, you become easy to access, but hard to feel. And that's the real problem. Men don't fall for availability, they fall for depth. If you want someone to genuinely invest in you, you need to show more than just your time. Show your standards. Show what matters to you. Show that you're not just physically present, you're emotionally present. That you're capable of deep, honest conversation. That you're not afraid to express your needs, your desires, your boundaries. That's what makes a person memorable. That's what builds emotional intimacy. So don't confuse availability with value. Your constant presence isn't what makes someone love you. It's your ability to be real, to connect on a level that goes beyond surface level interaction. You don't have to be on standby to be desired. You don't have to always say yes to be respected. In fact, the most emotionally magnetic people are the ones who can say, I'm not always available, but when I'm with you, I'm fully here. That's the kind of presence that creates impact. And impact is what leaves a lasting impression long after the conversation ends. In the early stages of dating, one of the most powerful psychological dynamics is the idea of the vacuum. When you stop doing everything, when you step back, even slightly, you create a gap, and gaps get filled. That's human behavior. We are wired to respond to space. When someone stops reaching out, we notice. When someone who used to overgive pulls back, we wonder. That pause in energy creates an emotional vacuum, and someone who's truly interested will instinctively want to close that gap with their own effort. Now, this isn't about manipulation. It's not about a pulling away to make him chase. It's about creating the conditions for authentic behavior to emerge. Because when you're doing all the initiating, all the planning, all the texting, there's no room left for him to show up. You've already filled every space where effort could exist. Sometimes we don't even realize how much we're over-functioning in a dynamic until we stop. That's when we see what's real. What comes back in the absence of our effort? That's the moment of truth. And it's a scary one because part of us fears that if we stop giving, we'll lose the connection altogether. But the truth is, if the connection only existed because you were holding it up, it wasn't a connection. It was a performance. Doing less doesn't mean you care less. It means you're willing to see how much they're willing to invest. It's giving the other person the opportunity to take the lead, to reach out, to plan, to wonder what you're thinking. And that's important because people value what they invest in. When someone puts in effort, they start to feel emotionally tied to the process. They've put something on the line. They're now participating in building the relationship, not just passively receiving it. And when a man begins to feel that shift, when he notices you're not always the one filling the space, he starts to assess his own level of interest. If he's serious, that space will activate his intention high. He'll want to step up, not just to win you, but because he genuinely starts to value what your absence revealed. That you are not dependent, you are not desperate, and you are not driving the connection out of fear. Of course, this only works when the pause comes from a place of self-respect, not punishment. You're not withdrawing affection to play a game. You're simply letting go of control to let reality surface. You're saying, if this is mutual, let me see it without my effort being the glue. And if the vacuum remains empty, that tells you everything. Because love isn't just about how you feel about someone. It's about how much they're willing to meet you. And sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is to stop filling the space and let the truth come forward. There's a common belief that if you love someone, you should do more for them, give more, show more, be more. But when it comes to deep emotional connection, especially with men, it's not about how much you give. It's about how much he invests. He invests. Because the truth is, people don't fall in love with the ones they receive everything from. They fall in love with the ones they give a piece of themselves to. When a man contributes emotionally, when he opens up, supports you, comforts you, or shows up for you in a vulnerable moment, he starts to become more emotionally involved. He starts to care more deeply, not because of what you've done for him, but because of what he's done for you. That emotional contribution becomes a reflection of how invested he is, and that investment becomes the foundation of real love. It's counterintuitive, but doing less often allows this process to happen. When you leave space for him to lean in, emotionally, mentally, or through effort, you give him the opportunity to attach. He starts to see himself in the relationship. He starts to feel useful, appreciated, and connected. He begins to feel needed in a meaningful, not needy way. And that's the key. Men don't want to feel needed because you can't survive without them. They want to feel that their presence matters, that their words have impact, that their emotional effort has weight. But if you're constantly managing the relationship, carrying all the emotional weight, solving every problem, or over-communicating, there's no space for him to step into a meaningful role. He becomes a passenger, not a participant. And passengers don't fall in love, they observe. The challenge is that many women are conditioned to be the emotional caregivers. They check in first. They soothe, they overexpress, they anticipate needs before they're even spoken. And while that can come from a good place, it can also rob the man of the very thing that creates his bond, his own emotional effort. Let him support you sometimes. Let him be the one who comforts. Let him worry about you for a change. Share your thoughts and let him respond. Pause long enough for him to ask, "Are you okay?" When he steps into that emotional space, he doesn't just feel like he's helping, you become more significant to him. Why? Because he's not just receiving love, he's giving it, and giving creates attachment. Love isn't built solely on grand gestures or endless attention. It's built in those small shared emotional moments where someone chooses to show up. So don't take that away from him by always being the one who holds it all together. Instead, let him show up. Let him contribute. Let him invest emotionally, because the more of himself he puts into you, the more of his heart he risks. And that is exactly how real love begins. There's a misconception that if you stop overgiving, slow down your responses, or aren't always available, you'll come across as cold or disinterested. But in truth, doing less doesn't signal a lack of care. It signals a strong sense of self-worth. It says, I don't have to overextend to be valued. Valued. My presence is enough. When you constantly go out of your way to prove your affection or availability, the message underneath often comes from a place of fear. Fear of being replaced, of not being chosen, of not being enough as you are. And that fear can drive behaviors that don't reflect confidence but insecurity. On the other hand, when you do less with intention, when you allow space in the connection, you're sending a very different message. You're saying, I believe in my value. I don't need to earn your love by overfunctioning. That's powerful. That's attractive. You see, self-worth is quiet. It doesn't beg. It doesn't rush. And it certainly doesn't chase. It knows that love based on chasing is fragile, but love that grows from mutual respect is solid. When you show that you're not scrambling for someone's attention, it signals emotional maturity. It tells a man like you, but I like me too, and I'm not going to abandon myself to keep you. And here's the truth most people don't say out loud. A man doesn't fall in love because you're constantly doing things for him. He falls in love when he respects you, and nothing commands respect more than someone who honors their own time, values, and boundaries. Doing less also allows your energy to feel intentional instead of excessive. If you're always the one initiating, accommodating, fixing, or adjusting, it can begin to feel like you're trying too hard. That doesn't inspire emotional depth. It often creates a dynamic where the other person sits back and lets you run the relationship. But when you step back, when you stop rushing in to manage every detail, it gives him space to wonder, to appreciate, and to act. This is not about withholding affection or playing games. It's about showing up from a place of fullness, not desperation. When you do less and still show warmth, still show kindness, still remain open, what you're saying is, I'm emotionally available, but I'm not emotionally dependent. That distinction changes everything. So the next time you feel tempted to do more just to feel secure, pause. Ask yourself, am I doing this because it feels good to me? Or because I'm afraid he'll lose interest if I don't? If the answer is fear, that's your cue to trust yourself more, to lean into your self-worth, to do less, not to pull away, but to stand tall in your value. Because the right person won't confuse your self-respect for indifference. They'll recognize it as the reason you're worth choosing. In the early stages of a connection, it's easy to get caught up in managing the emotional tempo, trying to keep the spark alive, overanalyzing every message, making sure things feel progressive and exciting. But when you're constantly filling the space, initiating conversations, suggesting plans, or interpreting silence as a problem to fix, you may unintentionally be steering the relationship so much that you can't even tell where he is in it. Doing less, stepping back just a little, allows his intentions to rise to the surface. It shifts the spotlight away from your actions and places it squarely on his. What does he do when you stop doing everything? Does he reach out? Does he follow through? Does he show interest even when you're not nudging it along? This pause isn't a game. It's a reveal. It helps you observe, without interference, how invested he truly is. Because intention can't be forced. You can inspire it, but you can't create it on someone else's behalf. A man who's genuinely interested will show you with consistency, not just chemistry. But if you're constantly driving the connection forward, it becomes impossible to separate your desire from him. You're creating momentum for two. One of the most emotionally intelligent things you can do in dating is to resist the urge to close every gap. When you stop overfunctioning, you create space for someone to rise to the occasion. Or not. And either outcome is valuable. Because clarity is power. If he doesn't step in to meet the moment, then you've just been spared the pain of a one-sided investment. But when he does show up, when he starts initiating, showing thoughtfulness, being emotionally present, you get to see his genuine interest. That effort doesn't come from pressure. Wait, it comes from internal desire. And that's the kind of intention that builds real relationships. Doing less is not about withdrawing affection. It's about refusing to overcompensate for his lack of clarity. It's about giving the connection room to reveal its truth. You're not punishing, ghosting, or disappearing. You're simply observing. You're making space for his behavior to tell you the story, not just your hopes or assumptions. And this is important. Your value does not increase by doing more. In fact, constantly doing more often clouds your ability to discern who's actually showing up for you. When you remove yourself from the driver's seat, you can finally see if the man beside you wants to take the wheel, or if he was just along for the ride. So if you want to know where someone really stands, try doing less. Stop carrying the emotional weight of two people. Let his intentions be seen without your influence. Not because you're playing it cool, but because you respect yourself enough to say, I'll match your energy, but I won't manufacture your effort. That clarity, that's where love either deepens or frees you to find something real. When you're constantly available, constantly initiating, and always going out of your way to maintain the connection, you risk creating a dynamic where the other person's interest becomes a matter of convenience rather than genuine desire. Show. If he knows that you'll always be there, no matter what, there's little motivation for him to step up in a meaningful way. He may show interest, but it's often the kind that can be turned on and off depending on his mood, his schedule, or what else is happening in his life. Doing less disrupts that dynamic. It pushes the relationship out of the realm of easy and comfortable and into the space where genuine interest must be shown. When you're not always there to fill every gap or answer every text immediately, he has to decide whether this is something he really wants or if he's just treating you as an option. This is important because genuine interest looks different from casual convenience. Genuine interest shows up consistently, even when it's not easy. It involves effort and intention. It's about wanting to be present, not just when it's convenient or when he has nothing better going on. When you do less, you're challenging him to demonstrate that kind of authentic investment. Think about it this way. If someone truly values you, they will make time for you. They'll want to be involved in your life, to share their thoughts and feelings, and to show up even when it requires effort or sacrifice. But if you're always available and always the one reaching out, it's easy for him to slip into a pattern where your presence is just there when he needs it, like a backup plan or a pleasant distraction. By doing less, you're essentially raising the bar for how he interacts with you. You're saying, I'm here, but I'm not a convenience. I'm someone worthy of attention, effort, and respect. This shift forces him to check in with his true feelings and intentions. It makes it clear that being with you requires active participation, not passive acceptance. This doesn't mean you have to be distant or cold. It means you prioritize your own time, energy, and emotional well-being. You don't chase after someone who isn't willing to meet you halfway. You allow the relationship to unfold in a way that feels reciprocal and meaningful. And the beauty of this is that it naturally weeds out those who aren't truly interested. It helps you focus your energy on someone who sees you as a priority rather than an option. When a man genuinely wants to be with you, he'll make it obvious. He won't wait for you to create all the momentum. He'll create his own. So, doing less isn't about playing games or testing him. It's about honoring yourself enough to expect real effort and genuine interest. It's about creating a space where love can grow authentically, built on mutual desire, respect, and care. There's something deeply magnetic about mystery and intrigue in relationship. It's not about playing games or being deliberately secretive. It's about allowing parts of yourself to unfold naturally over time, rather than revealing everything all at once. When you do less, you naturally create space for mystery, and that space invites curiosity, interest, and deeper emotional engagement. When you're always available, always sharing your thoughts, your schedule, your emotions in real time, it can feel like the entire story is already told before the relationship has a chance to develop. There's less for him to discover because you've given everything up front. And while honesty and transparency are essential, there's a balance between being open and keeping some things for the natural rhythm of connection. Mystery isn't about withholding your true self. It's about pacing the revelation of who you are in a way that builds anticipation and excitement. When you do less, you're not rushing the process, and that allows a man to become genuinely curious. He begins to wonder about your world, your passions, your thoughts, the things that aren't immediately visible. Curiosity is a powerful form of attraction because it engages the imagination and makes the experience of getting to know you feel like an adventure. The psychology behind mystery is simple. Humans are wired to want what they can't fully grasp right away. When someone is too available or shares too much too soon, it can create a sense of predictability, and predictability tends to lead to boredom or complacency. But when you maintain a bit of mystery, you keep him guessing, and more importantly, keep him wanting more. Doing less also allows you to avoid oversharing, which can sometimes dilute your emotional impact. When you reveal everything at once, it's like a story with no chapters left. There's nothing left to look forward to. But when you pace your openness, each interaction feels meaningful. It creates moments where he can feel like he's earning your trust, learning new things about you, and deepening his emotional investment gradually. Moreover, mystery helps maintain your sense of individuality and independence. It reminds both of you that you're not a book on a shelf waiting to be read entirely in one sitting. You're a whole person with layers, interests, and experiences that deserve time to be explored. That sense of depth is attractive because it signals emotional richness and complexity. And let's be honest, mystery also creates an emotional pull that pure availability can't. It invites him to lean in, to engage actively, and to invest more effort because he wants to understand and be part of your story. When you do less, you're creating a dynamic where he has to show up to discover who you really are. And that process is what builds real intrigue and, ultimately, love. So by doing less, you're not closing off or playing hard to get. You're simply pacing the unfolding of your story in a way that keeps attraction alive and makes the journey of getting to know you truly exciting. Emotional independence is one of the most attractive qualities you can embody in any relationship. It means you're not relying on someone else to fill your emotional needs or validate your worth. When you do less, when you resist the urge to overinvest or constantly seek reassurance, you create space for this independence to grow. And ironically, this very independence becomes a magnet for healthy, lasting attachment. Attachment in relationships is often misunderstood. People confuse attachment with neediness or dependency. But healthy attachment is about connection that arises from two whole individuals choosing to be with each other. Not because they need to be saved or completed, but because they want to share their lives. Emotional independence means you show up as your full self, not as someone who's trying to patch holes or avoid loneliness. Doing less is a way to practice this independence. It's about stepping back and saying, I am complete on my own, and I'm here to share that wholeness with someone who adds to my life, not completes it. This mindset changes the energy you bring to the relationship. Instead of chasing or clinging, you radiate confidence and calm. That energy is incredibly attractive because it signals that you're emotionally healthy and grounded. When you're emotionally independent, you don't take a man's behavior personally in the same way. You understand that his actions are about him, not a reflection of your worth. This awareness prevents you from overreacting, over-explaining, or trying to fix the dynamic by doing more. Instead, you maintain your boundaries and allow the relationship to unfold naturally. This builds healthy attachment because it encourages mutual respect and balance. When you're not emotionally dependent, you give space for him to bring his authentic self without pressure. He doesn't feel like he has to earn your love by meeting endless demands. Instead, he's invited to show up freely and genuinely, which fosters trust and intimacy. Doing less also means you're less likely to fall into codependent patterns. You avoid the trap of trying to control the relationship by over-functioning or over-giving. That's important because control often masquerades as care, but it actually blocks true connection. Healthy relationships thrive when both partners feel free to be vulnerable without losing themselves in the process. This emotional independence also helps you spot red flags early. When you're not desperate for connection, you're more discerning. You don't ignore signs that someone isn't showing up for you in ways that matter. Instead, you recognize that your energy is valuable and should be invested where it's reciprocated. Ultimately, doing less means honoring yourself enough to let love happen naturally, without forcing or sacrificing your emotional well-being. It creates a foundation where attachment is built on genuine care, respect, and mutual investment. And that's how you attract the kind of love that lasts, not the kind that leaves you drained and uncertain, but the kind that enriches your life and strengthens your sense of self. At the heart of this entire conversation is a profound truth. Love isn't about how much you do or how often you show up. It's about how much space you create for real connection to grow, space that invites a man to invest emotionally, to show up authentically, and to want to be with you because he chooses to, not because you pushed or pulled him there. Doing less isn't about playing games or being indifferent. It's about honoring your worth, protecting your energy, and trusting that the right man will rise to meet you when given the chance. When you stop overfunctioning, you reclaim your power. You allow mystery, curiosity, and genuine interest to flourish. You create the conditions where emotional independence becomes your foundation, attracting love that is healthy, balanced, and deeply fulfilling. Remember, love is a dance between two whole people, not a solo performance where one person does all the work. When you do less, you invite him to step into his role, to contribute emotionally, and to show you that he truly cares. That's when real love begins, when it's mutual, intentional, and built on respect. So if you want to fall in love and be loved in return, start by doing less. Not because you want to lose interest or to test him, but because you value yourself enough to wait for a love that chooses you freely. The psychology of doing less isn't just a strategy. It's a declaration of your worth and a gateway to a deeper, more meaningful connection. Trust yourself, hold your boundaries, and watch how the right man will step forward, not because you chased him, but because he wanted to be there with you wholeheartedly.